Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest edition of Gladiator Mastery. Today I have the most amazing guest. I met this gentleman online and he blew me away. I did a special invitation and by luck, the universe, the energies, he happens to be in Dubai for 2 days and he made a special time to meet me. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jonathan Daniels to you. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Dubai.
Thank you.
I am fascinated by your life. I'm fascinated about the things I'm going to find out, hopefully through the questions I'm going to ask. Now, your foundation is called From the Depths.
Yep.
So please introduce From the Depths to the audience and me in detail.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It really is, I mean, Dubai is a crazy city, right? Where sort of anything's possible and you know, you reached out to me, found me on Instagram, a couple of months ago when you personally were visiting the German Nazi death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and you reached out to me from there and actually gave a nice donation to the foundation, so thank you for that. I created From the Depths about 8 years ago now. From the Depths being, well, the name actually itself comes from the book of Psalms, the book that King David wrote discussing, and from the depths really means from the deepest, darkest, most difficult place. And the reason I called my foundation that is because my foundation deals with one of the most difficult things in history, recent history especially, which is the Holocaust, the absolute tragedy that befell humanity just around 80 years ago. Obviously with the death of mass murder of 6 million Jews, millions and millions of others. And it really I started looking around and understanding that my generation, I'm 36, my generation didn't feel like we were doing too much in terms of the memory memorial. It was all very academic, lots and lots of books, but not many podcasts, not much Instagram, not much social media. And the younger generation were kind of getting lost within all of this. So I really wanted to understand how I could take this subject and attempt to share it to a younger audience, and an audience that perhaps hasn't heard of it before, because the lessons of the Holocaust are universal. And this is, you know, lessons of being a decent human being, of being honorable, of being decent, and of not being a racist, and of not being full of hatred. And so that was really the focus of why I created this foundation. And thank God, or inshallah, as they say here, we've been successful, and really fight and push forward to make sure that we get this message out to as many people as we can, in as many ways as we can as well.
Amazing. Now, for a young man, how did you get introduced to this? What was it? Your parents took you to a particular camp? You saw something triggered, or something that you always were interested in when you were a child?
Well, I grew up in London. You're not too far away from where you had a formative part of your youth in Manchester. And growing up in London, I grew up in the Jewish community of Northwest London, and I was really surrounded by a lot of Holocaust survivors. It was kind of part of my life. Like,
I remember seeing them, and with the tattoos,
with the numbers on their arms. And,
yes, I remember.
You know, when you and when I was growing up in the UK, it was just they were around, and slowly they were less of them, and they made a big impact on who I am. Like, I was always growing up reading books about the Holocaust. You know, I heard of my great-grandfather. You know, my grandmother is the person I love most in the whole world, and my biggest fan. She'll be listening to this. And my grandma, her father was the only member of his family who survived. His entire family were murdered. Everyone. They lived in a small town in Poland, and the German Nazis came in and killed everybody. And I grew up with kind of that feeling constantly of well, this just happened to us. It wasn't that long ago. And I really felt like stuff needs to be done more. And it was actually about 9 years ago. The Prime Minister of Israel back then was Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes.
And he spoke in the United Nations. And this was just after Ahmadinejad, the former Iranian tyrant, gave a speech calling to wipe out the state of Israel, the Jewish people, the United States, the West, you know, everything that wasn't, you know, their crazy worldview. And when he stood up in the UN and said, look, we as a people experienced genocide and massacre. We're not going to wait around and see again. And I remember the world being quite divided as to whether, he should be using this as an example, he shouldn't be using it. And it was kind of like, well, hold on a second. We always say, you have to learn from your history. Well, how is this even questionable? And it really sort of struck me that many people didn't have the basics in understanding. So the first thing we did, actually... Educate. But we educated who you'd least expect. The first event that we held as a foundation was in 2014 on the 27th of January, which was International Holocaust Memorial Day, where I put on an event where we took the majority of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, for one day to Auschwitz. We held a session of the Knesset just outside of Auschwitz. Like, such a strong...
And some survivors
Absolutely.
came?
Almost every single member of Knesset was accompanied by a survivor. And survivors have absolutely shaped my life. This week, I mean, I personally, even this week, I've shared very little on social media. I feel, even though I'm here, this has been one of the most difficult weeks I've had in a long time. Unfortunately, this week, a Holocaust survivor, the name of Edward Mossberg, whose picture actually was the one that brought you to me. Unfortunately, he passed away just a few days ago. And Edward Eddy was an absolute mentor to me. He was the toughest, strongest, most incredible person. And a few years ago, actually, he gave me this bracelet. I don't know if you can see this bracelet.
It's his number.
Which was his number. He was actually sent to Mauthausen concentration camp. And in Mauthausen, they wouldn't bother even tattooing you because you're going to be killed. So they give you this little
You
piece.
weren't even worth a number or time to...
They just give you this little thing. You'd put it on you however you could. He wrapped it around his wrist and wore it as a bracelet. After the war, he carried on wearing it. And he gave me this a couple of years ago. And he said, Johnny, wear this. Carry it. Remember me. And people will ask you what's that on your hand. And then you'll remember me again. And you'll remind my story to them. And that was literally just a few days ago. And to say I'm heartbroken is an
mildly,
understatement. Yeah.
The problem is that they're all dying now.
Yeah.
None of them are less than 90 years old. And you're going to be feeling low for quite a while, right? Because everyone you meet is going to die shortly, right?
Well, look, I mean, no problem. I mean, we're dealing not just with survivors. I mean, I just came back from my 6th trip to Ukraine. I've been going in and out of Ukraine since the beginning of the war, providing for Holocaust survivors and providing for another group of people. I think probably the main focus of the foundation, especially during COVID and since then, has been dealing with what are known as the righteous amongst the nations. So the righteous amongst the nations were non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Second World War. So, probably the most famous story because of Spielberg is obviously Schindler, with Schindler's List. The factory where he made a list of Jews, brought them into work for him, gave some fictitious jobs which enabled them to stay alive and not be taken to because they were worth it for the Germans to be kept alive. However, there were around almost close to now to 28,000 other non-Jews who have been honoured by the State of Israel, who risked their life to save Jews.
They're alive?
Well, from the 28,000, at the beginning of COVID, we were supporting around about 300 of these righteous. Sadly, now there's only about 130 still alive. So these are the last connections to this history. But again, you're dealing with people, and I think for me, well, first of all, there's absolute thanksgiving, right? That is kind of like, well, I'm a young Jewish man.
Yes.
Right? My family, unfortunately, wasn't able to be saved by anybody, but other people's were. Other of my brothers and sisters' family were saved. So you have these elderly people today living in Eastern Europe and even in Ukraine who risked their lives, literally risked their lives. In Poland, for example, if you were caught harboring a Jew,
you're dead. Your
whole family's dead.
Yeah,
the Ulm family in Markova is a terrible example of a family with a pregnant wife and children who were caught hiding Jews and all murdered. And so, often what I found especially, and you would have experienced this, that visiting a place like Auschwitz-Birkenau, the German Nazi death camp that was built in occupied Poland, is a harrowing experience. But for a lot of people, you'll leave there and it's like, well, what's the message, right? Is not, not to kill people, not to hate people. Well, for normal people, you don't have that feeling. I'm not going to leave, with, oh, whoops. It's like, well, no, I don't feel like that. I'm not genocidal. I don't have these tendencies. And
Yeah, but you can turn the much good turn away. You can
Yeah.
turn a blind eye.
You can turn a blind eye.
Exactly. That's as bad sometimes. As,
It is, but it's also it's a difficult message to teach. However, when you start teaching from the stories of the righteous,
yes.
then the question becomes different. Then the question is, well, what am I doing, right? And there is examples today. We've got the Uyghurs in China, this community of Muslims in China who are literally being put into camps and being sterilized, and women are being raped and murdered. Like, this is awful. Ukraine, what are we doing there? Like, how are any of us taking these messages of righteousness into our lives? And are we? And I think that these are major questions that we need to ask ourselves. And so when you talk of the stories of the righteous and visit with these people, and for me on a personal level, supporting them, during COVID, I traveled to 21 countries in my car with my dog. We literally went from country to country with all the COVID rules and regulations and headaches and,
didn't stop you.
Didn't stop me. Triple face mask. Sometimes I could barely breathe. Gloves, everything. This was at the point where if your head bumped a thing in the supermarket, oh my god, I got head COVID, right? Like everything was
exactly,
petrifying and scary.
Don't look at them. Don't touch
Oh my
them.
god,
Don't
oh my
breathe
god,
near
right?
them,
Yeah, everything's so scary. But it was very much the feeling that if we don't do something now, these people literally, like, it really was a problem back then. You're dealing with elderly people's immune systems are not right.
Yes.
What are you going to do? We have to step up. And it was probably the first time since the war that it wasn't just an opportunity to say thank you and we have you'd appreciate this, but I personally drove a bunch of London taxis, black cabs out from London to Poland, where they serve as a free taxi service for the righteous. Just enabling them to get out and go where they want, whenever they want, and having no worries of paying for it or how they're going to get around, trusting a driver, anything like that. But the first time it was actually an opportunity to stand up and help keep them safe. I was so glad that I was able to do that and be there during this time.
How do you find them?
There's lists, local communities. It's not always easy.
It won't be easy. Like,
no.
How many Holocaust survivors are there?
Holocaust survivors kind of depends how you count, but there's sort of tens of thousands, if not more.
And then Auschwitz survivors?
Auschwitz survivors a lot less.
Yeah.
And then obviously righteous amongst the nations, as I said before, there's just 130 in the whole world. So there's at the beginning of the war, there was 11 in Ukraine. We offered everybody to come out if they wanted, to help them escape. Most of them, they were like...
It's home. What have they got? Yeah.
Where am I
they
going
don't
to go?
need it. They're in the 90s.
I'm 90.
Yeah.
If I'm going to die, let me die at home. One of the ladies, her family wanted to get out. We helped them escape, and that was a tremendously powerful feeling. Imagine, but
the
like
happiness on her face.
But not just that, but I went to the border. The Israeli embassy drove the family out, and then I took them to a hotel and put them up for the night.
So because of the righteous, the Israeli government supports you to protect them or take them out.
Well, yeah, I mean, in that case...
Is there a fund for them to look after them?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a weird one. There are foundations that are set up to support them, but it's also this weird mentality. And often in a place like Eastern Europe, you'll have elderly people who will die with a lot of money in the bank, but die poor.
Yeah.
The old generation. It was like, no, you save it for a rainy day, right? And they end up saving it all their lives and then dying poor. They won't spend the money necessarily on themselves. And I know that. So for me, it was always a situation of, okay, well, what do I do right now to put an ease on their life? So for example, every Christmas I visit them with huge hampers, massive boxes full of everything they need to stay home, stay safe, and enjoy Christmas. Everything from food to baubles, and I even bring them each Christmas tree. Right, that was a weird thing for a Jewish boy to do. Right,
Yeah.
go and buy hundreds of Christmas trees, all live. A lot of them planted them in their gardens since, and they're like, I don't need one this year. I've got the one in the garden from last time. I'm like, bring you another one as well. But that's been an amazing thing to do. And so Israel, for example, we have obviously a good relationship with the embassies in the different countries, and ambassadors will often come with us and hand things out, and just adds an extra level. But the foundation's not funded by the state of Israel. We're not funded by any governments. It's all donors like yourself who just step up and give. For me, it was important that we have this ability to be quick and not be reliant upon regulations and nonsense. For example, the war. right now with Ukraine. There wasn't time to wait, right, to help people. It wasn't, let me ask the board. It was like, no, right? Like, people are literally, we had a Holocaust survivor, with one of the most harrowing pictures. He'd come across from Lvov, right? He'd got across to Poland, and he came over in his slippers, and he'd kind of got through everything, and I sat down with him, and I just looked him in the eye, and I put my hand in his hand. I said, "Tell me your story," and to see this man break down, this old strong man. I mean, he was big, like he was a very tall man, and he'd as a young boy, in the train station, the family were trying to escape, and he got lost from his family, and ended up lost and found his way to partisans in the forest during the war, which is how he survived. Harrowing experience as a young boy. And he said, "I never thought I'd be running from the train station again." And you're sitting looking at this man, and I looked down, and he's got his slippers on. He's old, he has problems with his feet. And he'd come across with his slippers, and I said, "Where are your shoes?" He said, "I don't have any." Now, we had a big problem. He has 47 shoes, right? It's big
Huge,
feet.
yes.
Yeah. You can't buy that in every shop in Poland. And I put on Instagram. A great friend reached out, one of the cool sneaker stores in Warsaw that provides all the basketball players and stuff. They brought me this insane pair of limited edition Nike Air Force Ones, right? Yeah, expensive shoes, right? So literally the next day I was around with him and helping him put on these shoes that
Beautiful story.
But it's all about people stepping up and helping, and I think that's kind of been the amazing thing, is that I'm a millennial, and I really want that other people get involved, and it doesn't, it's not all about the money, because some people just don't have, right, which is also fine, but it's silly things like sharing, right, or telling a story, or becoming part of this in a way, and each of us doing our own part to make sure that these stories don't die and these people's messages do carry on.
I'm sure you carry hundreds, possibly thousands of stories, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
What I could talk to you for days, let alone hours. What I realized it was quite scary, was that it was how they build BMW, Porsche, Mercedes. They're very good at engineering. Auschwitz was a death factory.
Yeah.
It was just, you were a commodity, and you didn't last sometimes more than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Off the train, into the chamber, boom, boom, out.
Yeah.
Your ashes were just thrown away.
Yeah, that you kind of wonder how any of us can, do this to another human being, really, to dehumanize somebody in such a way. It's like, for goodness sake, we're all just people, right? What difference,
They were desensitized, weren't they? They didn't care. It was children, women, old people, men. It didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
Left or right.
No, I'll never forget. I had really, I was truly blessed by God that I had the opportunity to spend so much time with Mr. Mossberg, who passed away, as I said, just this week. And one of the most difficult stories he told me, it was in the Krakow ghetto. They were surrounded by Germans, and he showed me the exact place that it happened, and it was one story that he had a real hard time telling.
You took him there?
I was there with him. I was there with him. There's all over my Instagram. There's tons of stories of me walking through with him, and the story when they were shooting children in bags and throwing them against the walls, babies. That's how awful of a human. It doesn't make sense. I couldn't.
It became enjoyment, what I mean?
Yeah, but how?
Why? Yeah.
How much? You can't even think there's people that don't like, right? There's always people we don't like, but I could never wish them harm, right? And even if I really hated someone and wished them harm, I couldn't kill their children.
Baby, exactly.
It's what on earth? Or the elderly, the
So they were killing these babies for fun.
Just for fun. I was in Ukraine last week with a Holocaust survivor. He was a young boy, and again, thousands of stories. And he was from a small town about 40 kilometers north of Warsaw. He managed to escape. Whole long story. You can see that on Instagram. But one of the parts of his story that just absolutely shocked me was, as they were leaving his father, the Germans came in straight at the beginning of the war, rounded up all the Jews, and his father walked back into the house to take his elderly mother on his back to get her out. And the German was like, no, just leave her there. And it's okay. So he listened, he left his mother there, he exited the house with his 4 boys.
They went back in and shot her.
They set the house on fire. They burnt her alive. And you just like, what? Like, you know, the level, right? You know, and 6 million is an insane number to think of. Like, none of us, we probably won't meet 6 million people in our lifetimes, right? If you think of the biggest football stadiums with all that noise, what's it, 50, 60? What, 80, 90 if it's Wembley? Thousands.
Exactly.
That's not close to 6 million. You can't really begin to imagine. And the other really important thing is individualizing the stories.
Yes.
Right? It's putting a face on this, and it's understanding, well, there was this gentleman who I met last week.
Yes.
There was Mr. Mossberg and other survivors and people who survived, and through them you hear the stories of their families. You know, after all the years of doing what I do, I don't know exactly what happened to my family. There aren't records. They lived in a very small city, or town, really.
No survivors above
No one survived. He actually, you know, had his golden ticket, which is a British passport. His parents, my great-great-grandparents, went to London in the 1900s. They were there for a couple of years, and he was born there. It didn't work out. They came back to Poland. And then when conscription started and things weren't looking great, you know, they were like, go. You know, you've got your British passport, get out.
So he wasn't there. When they invaded, he wasn't. That
wasn't
was his
there.
ticket.
But he, you know, he was a baker. Like, he wasn't a rich man, and he was doing everything he possibly could to try and save a little bit of money to maybe send his brother. And he was unable to do so.
Didn't make it.
And his whole family were killed. My family. And until today, we don't know where, we don't know how. There's nowhere for me. There's not a grave for me to visit. There's not a site for me to pay my respects.
It's hard to even imagine. Hard to imagine. So many questions. When you meet these people, have they been able to form normal relationships? Or are they just messed up in the head because of what they've been through? It's okay. You say you survive, but really, do you survive?
Well,
you could be surviving a nightmare, hell, because of what you've seen and what you experienced.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, today, you know, and it's understandable. We're talking about people with PTSD from really anything, and you know, and you see terrible things. Like, honestly, like, you know, people who have experienced a kind of childhood trauma, right, or who have, you know, any kind of assault as a kid. You know, and this really carries through their lives and influences everything, and you understand it on a very deep level.
Yes, I was reading that some people get violent.
Yeah.
They become violent because there's so much anger and frustration.
And people then carry on, right?
Exactly.
So you'll see a lot of people who, you know, you watch any of these crazy Netflix shows about, you know, serial killers or rapists and all of this like awful stuff. Most of them are doing something that happened to them as a kid. But, and this is from, in perspective of what a Holocaust survivor went through, really not very much, right?
Exactly.
You know, it was a little bit of trauma, again, an extreme trauma, and you can't put any comparison, but a trauma that lasted a small amount of time or wasn't as bad. But the question of a lot of Holocaust survivors had very difficult lives after the war.
Yes.
Many had incredibly difficult lives after the war.
So,
you know, how do you build off that? You know, seeing all of that and moving forward.
Have a normal relationship, a friendship, when everybody you knew turned against you.
Yeah, or everyone you died, right? Your whole family was murdered, and honestly, the best example I can use is the example of Mr. Mossberg. You know, Eddie had met his fiancée Sesha just before. They kind of were boyfriend and girlfriend. Right at the beginning of the war, and in Plaszow concentration camp.
So he must have been in his late 90s or 100 years old.
Yeah, he was 96 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
So she gave him a little picture of herself, and Eddie was, you know, he was a character, right? He managed to keep this picture with him through all the camps, and towards the end he wore it as a necklace around him, and Eddie survived all of this. And he came to America. He actually, after the war, they you know, through anti-Semitism and other stuff, they got to America.
Did he meet her again? Or?
Yeah, they met after the thing.
Wow.
They got married in sort of DP camp and went to America together to build their life. And he went with nothing. He had nothing in his pocket, you know, and he worked as a steward in cinemas and 3 jobs, you know, sewing stuff, whatever he could to make a little bit of money, because he understood that the future is what he needs to focus on now. And there's an incredible family called the Wilf family in America. They're very big contractors, building contractors. And, it was back before, it was a different time. So what they said was, we're going to take different site managers on our different buildings. And, we used Holocaust survivors because, these are people who were uneducated to the part, right? The formidable education years that were in concentration camps.
Yes.
So they took these Holocaust survivors and let them run different projects for them because, they're going to be trustworthy, right?
They're going
to appreciate the job. And it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and they're going to strive to build a life again. They're going to be committed. They're going to
exactly.
work hard.
You're not going to worry about them nicking anything, right? They're going to behave the way they should. And Eddie really excelled, but really, really excelled. And he became like the number one guy for them. So much so that he then himself went on and became a contractor. Wow. And he became a multimillionaire.
Wow.
He built his life right from nothing to this. But his focus was on his future. He had 3 daughters, and it wasn't looking back. I'll have time for that. Right now, I need to make sure that my children are taken care of, that my future is taken care of, and in later years, I'll look back. And really, only in his later life did he start getting very involved with Holocaust education.
Because lots of survivors say nothing for decades, right? And then later on, they open up or share, or
it's kind of
some don't even want to talk about
it. It's kind of within our DNA as Jews, right? Which is also part of it. We've spent 2,000 years really running from place to place, persecuted almost everywhere we've been. There are very few places that didn't persecute Jews, unfortunately. As well as, again, I can look at it from a Jewish perspective, other people look from other perspectives, but we were persecuted tremendously. And so, we've created, a pretty good sense of humor as a result of that, many Jewish comics and so on and so forth, but also a focus always on looking forward. There is time for reflection, there is time for this, but we have to move forward. Because if we just sit and wallow in what happened, it doesn't really work. Now, again, there obviously were Holocaust survivors who couldn't deal with the pain after the war.
Lots committed suicide.
There were those who committed suicide. There were others who just never wanted to have children or families. There were those who, ended up all around the world, never wanting to discuss this again. But again, the pain is just unbelievable. So, I think it was rather individual, but many of them, people like Mr. Mossberg, went on, created the most remarkable lives of themselves. And only in later years, and his wife of 77 years.
This is the fiancée.
Yeah. She sadly passed 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And those were the hardest 2 years, I think, of his life. I was able to get to the States just a couple of days after the funeral. And I sat with him, and he was like, Johnny, you don't understand. She was not just my wife. She was my mother, she was my father, she was my sisters, all the people who were killed. She took on that role of all of them for him.
Wow.
And when he lost that,
he
lost everything to a degree. His children were the most important thing in his life, but his wife was really all of that for him, and that became very hard.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I noticed, these are tough questions. A lot of people say it was Nazis and not Germans.
Yeah.
Okay, but I believe there was 8,000 German or Nazi guards at just Auschwitz alone, right? And only 40 got prosecuted.
Yeah.
So 7,960 just went straight back into Germany and continued their lives.
Yeah. Well, I don't know these numbers, but even the term Nazi, you won't hear me using the term Nazi. I always say German Nazis.
Exactly.
And the reason I say that is because Nazis gives you some kind of, these weren't aliens who fell out the sky and did terrible things.
They were
these
human
were
beings.
Human beings.
Correct.
These were Germans, but also not just Germans.
The Poles, some Poles turned, right?
Every nation, you had, Polish collaborators. This is, well known, but, Poland was actually quite an interesting country because of that. For example, no Poles were guards at concentration camps. That didn't happen. Ukrainians, however, Lithuanians were remarkably brutal. Remarkably. When I speak to Righteous Amongst the Nations in Ukraine, they'll often tell me they were more scared of the Ukrainians than they were of the Germans. And this is often. Poland, you don't really get that. It's a slightly different story. But when you look across the board, truly the amount of collaboration was really high. It was kind of easy to rile people up.
Yes.
It really was. And people were riled up and brought into this. And, it's someone different, right? Those Jews.
Do you think they chose the pits of society? The Germans chose the murderers and the crooks and to do all their dirty work. No, just normal.
No. Yeah, doctors, Mengele, right? The famous
Yes,
doctor
true.
who was
Yes.
pointing right to left. The guy was a pretty decent doctor, well-known doctor,
Yes.
right? You know, these were high people
Some of
through
them were
society.
family men.
A lot of them were family men. They'd kill children in the day and go and put their children to bed at night. Complete nuts
Read them
cases.
lullabies.
Yes, sing them lullabies, right? You know, bring back presents from dead Jews, right? You can't imagine the level of hatred. But it wasn't just the dregs of society. There were, you know, obviously it was probably easier to rile them up. You know, it's always easier to rile up someone who's having a hard life, right? You know, which is unfortunately what we see in a lot of, we see that even today in the countries that have a lot of terrorism.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, it's keep
Strap yourself with the bombs, off you go. Yes.
Rich people don't blow themselves up.
Exactly.
Happy people don't blow themselves
And
up.
the thing is, rich people don't die in wars.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
It's the poor people who
Correct.
do, right? Because they need the money, they want something to live
Correct.
for. You know, if you build yourself a good life, you don't want to go waste it,
Exactly.
right? On killing or hurting anybody. You're focused on building your own future. But they were definitely, it wasn't definitely not just the dregs of society.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. One thing else I was thinking, I put myself there. I was, it's even now all the hair on my body is standing up. Like, it happened so fast, and they lied. They knew the human psychology. They said, you know, take your clothes off. Remember your tag number because you're going to come and pick up your clothes. They did it in such a way and so fast that even if I had a feeling or there was rumors that people are being gassed and, you know, I would probably want gotten along with it until it was too late, if that makes sense. Right? Because
Absolutely.
they knew if they lied to you, you'll just go along with it.
Right. Well, this also brings up an interesting question that you're way too polite to ask, which is, and it was actually one of the first questions ever asked, which is, you know, there was this idea that Jews went like sheep to the slaughter, that they didn't put up a fight. There's this idea.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think they just lied to them, right?
Well, it wasn't
As
even
a
just
human
that.
being.
But you're a dad, right?
Yes.
You will do anything to keep your daughters alive.
Correct.
Anything. I've got 2 daughters. I'm not putting myself out there. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to shout. I'm going to be quiet.
Correct.
And I'm going to try and figure out what's going on.
Figuring out what's going
And
on.
I'm going to listen and make sure that I
yes.
do everything I can
Yes.
to be part of this system.
And
Because
once
if
you're
I,
figuring out, you're dead.
basically,
Yes.
it was this systematic murder that took place. But there was an incredible, one of the head of the Actors Studio in the United States, you know, the famous Actors Studio. He was a legend of Hollywood who found James Dean, dated Marilyn Monroe. You know, this guy who lived the most insane life was a Holocaust survivor by the name of Jack Garfine. And I spent a ton of time with Jack in his last few years. And I mean, Jack, like literally, he was one of the, I listened to him, but I knew I wasn't actually understanding what he was saying. He was way too smart for me. Like, he was talking on another level, you know, telling me about Kafka and his plays and the understanding and the significance. And Jack just completely blew my mind. And one of the things, you know, Jack, there's a million stories I could tell of Jack's, but one of the stories that really grabbed me from Jack was he was actually, well, a few things. I'll start with the story of when he was actually, he was forced onto a train with his mother and younger sister, I believe, to go to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And when they'd entered the camp and they got off the railroad tracks, his mother kind of had a feeling that something wasn't right here. And she went to the capo, who were the Jews who were forced to help people off the trains and do certain things in a lie that they'd be kept alive. You know, these were the people who put the bodies into the thing. Awful, awful, awful thing. She went to one of the capos and said, "What's happening?" And he was like, "Lady, get lost." She said, "What's happening?"
Because they would get shot if they told the
Oh,
prisoners.
absolutely.
Yes.
They're going to be murdered,
Yeah,
right? And they'd often like keep their family members
And
to
they had
really
spies
threaten them.
spying on them to see if they,
Everyone was spying on
On
everyone.
each
It was
other,
like
correct.
awful, right? You know, it was talking like Hunger Games, right? Like you can't imagine the level of depravity that these people went through. So she managed eventually, through literally physically manhandling one of these guys, she was like, "What's going on?" And he whispered something to her. She took Jack, who was 13 years old, and he was a short guy in later life, he wasn't tall. She grabbed him and said, "I hate you. you are not my son. I never loved you. I don't want anything to do with you. Get away from me. And she threw Jack towards the men. Now, Jack was completely rolled up. He had no idea what was going on. And for years, I mean, he got married like 3 times, terrible relationships with women,
issues.
hated his wife,
Yes.
hated his mother, really hated his mother. And only later in life did he understand that she'd saved his life. She'd literally saved his life. He then had other stories of miracles that took him there. And he was just the most remarkable person. And he was able to view that time and understand kind of what had happened. But you know, and then Jack comes to America, and you know, I think one of the things that really shook me was a story that when Jack got to America, again, he, with nothing, and you know, ended up on a bus, and he's on a bus in Pennsylvania, and straight off the train, and he gets on the bus, and he's like, wow, you know, I'm on a bus in America. He's like 15 years old. So he gets on the bus with his bag and he runs to the back to look out the back window, and the driver's like slamming on the brakes. What are you doing? Get away from there. He's like, what's going on? He's like, you can't sit there. That's for blacks. And he was like...
Face prejudice.
And he was like, what the...
Yeah.
Right. What have I been through, right, to come here, to the land of the free, and people have to sit on the back of a bus?
Wow.
Right? He was blacklisted in Hollywood, right, for making...
Communist or something.
Well,
like
no, it wasn't even communist. He'd made a movie where 2 African Americans were kissing, right? And they were like, you can't do that. You know, blacks don't kiss in our movies. And he was like, hell no.
Wow.
Right? And, you know...
He made a stance.
He made a stand.
Yeah.
And he really stood. And he was like, I haven't been through what I've been through, right, to inflict any kind of racism on anybody else. And, you know, and I think this is also something that really... Studying this part of history should give us all an understanding of, like...
This prejudice right under our noses, happening right now. Just
everywhere.
Don't turn a blind eye. Be aware of it and do something.
And
no matter
stand
how
up.
small. Yeah.
Stand up. It's not... You don't have to be... You don't have to be killing another people to stand up and say, stop.
Correct.
Right? It's enough that you put people on the back of the bus. That isn't okay. We're all exactly the same. Right? The notion that we've created as human beings of having a hatred towards anybody else is ridiculous.
But you know, I was reading in the 10,000 years of human history, there's only been 200 years when we haven't had war.
No.
So it's part of life. It's become just part of life.
It is, but it doesn't mean we have to say that it's okay. And honestly, if it wasn't for these Holocaust survivors and these righteous and all these people, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I am today. You know, even now when we're talking through, I'm thinking, well, you know, literally, I just came back from my 6th trip to Ukraine during the war.
Yes.
As I said, and it's a bit.
Are you
nuts.
risking life here? Or no, things aren't as bad as you're not going to the borders.
No, I'm not going to necessarily to dangerous places. At the beginning, it was sketchy when I was going at the beginning, and there still were, like, it was definitely dodgy. Like, you had to watch where you're going, and even now, like, anything could happen any time. So. I wouldn't put my life at necessarily risk again. I have daughters and I have responsibility, so I do try and be careful. But even these small actions that I take and the foundation takes to help these people through this period, and especially those who are stuck inside, you know, is most definitely based off what, you know, we've learned in our shared experience and of turning around and stepping back. You know, it's amazing, but... And
your sacrifice isn't that much of a great deal compared to what these guys went through.
I've got my phone, I've got my Instagram, you know, I go in, I meet, you know...
Do you find yourself, do you cry when you're listening to them? Does it hit you still? Do you get emotional? How do you build that trust between you and them for them to open up? You know, maybe they haven't opened up to anyone for many years.
Well, I have had survivors who I was told, look, they're not going to tell you their story, they've never spoken, then they've spoken to me. I kind of... It was actually a question I was asked once by a journalist. They said, don't you feel like a heaviness? Like a heaviness of like 6 million people on your shoulders?
Yes.
Right. Like, don't you feel a heaviness, like shaking it? And I was like, to be honest, I kind of feel like they're lifting me up.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Like, I kind of feel like that my role is telling their stories. That this is really crucial. You know,
you're not ending up with the burden. You're actually sharing, you're sharing their wisdom.
Elie Wiesel, who was a very, very famous Holocaust survivor, you know, probably the most famous Nobel Nobel Prize laureate. He'd taken Obama and Oprah Winfrey, and very well known in America. His book Night, a very famous book, is required study in a lot of high schools all around America. Eddie was one of the first people who I met with when I started the foundation, and I said to him, Eddie, I was like, I'd like to do this, but what right do I have, right? Because I'm not a survivor, right?
Yes, I'm a kid, and
I'm young.
Exactly.
I'm 27 years old. I'm not a history. I don't have 7 letters before or after my name, right? Like, I'm not really anybody. How dare I discuss this subject? And he said, Johnny, you got it all wrong. He said, you're my witness. If your generation don't start standing up as witnesses of the witnesses, then everything's gone.
There are people who actually say it never existed. I can't believe it. I know that people are still saying that the world is flat, right?
Yeah, you got nutters everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
or the moon landing was all fake and Hollywood stuff. But how can they? How dare they, right?
Yeah. Well,
Now, 10 years down the line, there are probably going to be not many survivors left,
if any.
if any, 10 years.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to your foundation? Where are you going to go with this in 10 years?
Our focus has always been on educating, right? The fact that we've been blessed to be at this position where we're able to support the survivors and the righteous is something that I'm very happy about. But to be honest, our work becomes more important in 10 years' time. And
Because there's no one there to tell the
there's no one
story
to tell the story.
firsthand. Right?
No, and
Are you recording everything?
everything,
Wow.
everything. Like we just keep recording, and a lot of the stuff is there's hundreds and tens of thousands of hours of recordings, and a lot of stuff you don't really realize when it's going to be important, right? It's like, well, suddenly that person's story relating to that thing, becomes quite crucial and interesting, and it's also figuring out how we spread the message. So, for example, I wasn't too long ago in Uzbekistan, right, which is a fascinating country.
Central Asia.
Yeah, very, very interesting country. But, then suddenly I found myself following the route of Jews, especially from places like Belarus and Ukraine and Russia. The war became really major for them in 1941. So a lot of them were escaping to those areas. They had 250,000 Jews in Tashkent.
Wow.
Right, who knew?
No idea.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, who knew? But they'd found themselves there during the war, and the Uzbeks were generally quite decent to them, right?
Yes.
And so all of this history together
Yes.
becomes really interesting and important, and it's also focusing on, what are we doing to tell the story to a broader population as well? So we've worked with the Hollywood celebrities, and and Mike Tyson was a guest of ours in Poland not so long ago. We took him to see the Warsaw Ghetto sites.
How was he?
He was interesting. Mike's Mike, right? But Mike's audience is massive, right? And for Mike to take time and look at these
He's a
sites,
Muslim now, isn't he?
yeah, I don't think he's very practical. I'm
No.
not sure how religious he is.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. We
Well,
had
he wasn't practicing when he was with you.
no, I didn't see him. Well, maybe he prayed in quiet.
How much
I don't
time
know.
did you spend with him?
Quite a bit. That was an experience.
Interesting. We'll do it
Oh my
off the
gosh.
record. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
I'm gonna. Sorry.
It's interesting.
Before we go to
Yeah.
my thing, I'm gonna go back to the gentleman who dated Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Did he say anything about her?
The stories were nuts. Like, he was talking to me about Jimmy. I was like,
Hoffa.
no, Jimmy, and I was like trying to be. I was like, Jimmy.
Do you think I'll think of Jimmy? Who Jimmy?
Yeah, Jimmy, and it was James Dean.
No.
But he called him Jimmy.
Wow.
Yeah, and and Jimmy and his father had died, and it was a whole big thing, and Marilyn Monroe, and it was like pictures of him holding her hand and stuff, and like it's still.
He never
like,
said anything of her, about her. Or
yeah, she was a really sweet girl. He'd tell me how she was like a really sweet girl. It was so sad what happened to her, and she just
Did
got.
he feel she was killed or suicide?
I didn't really get into that, but I think it was suicide is what he felt like. He really was telling me, he was like, Johnny, like her situation was just sad.
Yes.
Like she was just a sad girl who got manipulated.
It's a little bit like Diana, I feel.
Yeah, it's
A bit like that. Lost in the headlights and really sad life and went too early.
Yeah, quite simply, but it was just nuts to
What
be.
a fascinating guy.
He was crazy fascinating. Like it was honestly like I'd just sit with him and you'd be like, what? Like, huh? Like, we'd be talking about the war and all of this stuff, and the thing was, a lot of people are Holocaust survivors, and that really is their kind of who they are. But Jack wasn't. Like, he was. If you
He
look at
took
his
life by the
Wikipedia,
balls and just
oh my god! Like you look at his Wikipedia, it's like Holocaust survivors like right at the end. Like, it wasn't like that wasn't who he
Yes.
was at all. And he was in 13 camps. You know, he was, you
what
know...
was his survival thing? Well, how
What-
did he
what-
survive?
I mean,
just
I-
work his
I-
ass off, or just
not
was he
even
smart
luck. I mean, I told you the story of his mother who threw
Yes.
him
to the other side?
to the other side, and then he was in line to meet Mengele, right? The doctor of Auschwitz, this
Yes.
horrible, horrible man who would point to one side for live and point to the other side for death. And he was
Experiment on children.
experiment on children, on twins, on everybody. The evil, evil man. And Jack was in line for Mengele. Jack was only 13, right? You got to remember, anyone who looked a bit young was just thrown
So
in
he
kills.
remembers seeing Dr. Mengele.
He stood in line to Mengele, and he's standing in line, and he's waiting for his turn. And Mengele looks you up and down, speaks to you a little bit, and he's in line, and he's telling me this story. And he's sitting right next to
He
me.
looked evil in the eye. Oh
And
my
he's
God.
just standing tall to Mengele. Mengele looks at him and reaches over and touches his face and strokes his face. And Jack did that to me, and honestly, like,
shook, yeah.
I was like this. And he stroked Jack on the face. And he said, "Tell me, young man, how old are you?" And Jack lied and said, "I'm 18. And suddenly this man, standing behind, and he always said he had like a rough beard like you, is what Jack said to me. He stood up and he said, "We're famous mosaic artists from Czechoslovakia." And Jack was like, "Okay."
Wow.
Right? So Mengele said, "Interesting." That way. And him and the guy went towards the line to live.
He's 13, it would have been that
13.
way. 14 would have been that way.
He would have been killed every single way. Somehow that man came from nowhere. Jack's then walking. And he says, "Oh, I feel a bit bad. I lied to that nice doctor." And he turns around to head back
go back
towards
to
Mengele to tell him that he lied. And one of the capos stops him
I said, "Do
and
not
says,
go.
"Where are you going?" He says, "Oh, I lied to the nice doctor." And he says, "Fool," and whacked him with his stick and says, "Get back there." And that's how
Saved again.
he got saved again. And then through Auschwitz, another, you know, story after story of just miraculous survival. It was
How long was he there? Because he didn't survive after 4 or 5 months, did you?
no, it really depended. I mean, he was sent from there to other camps, and to other places where work was needed suddenly, where this was, where that was. It was, again, there wasn't really a rhyme or reason. It was just kind of luck. It was,
Yes.
if you're lucky, you'll
Yes.
survive.
So you keep flicking the coin and he lands head
Oh
over
yeah,
the time.
but you look at someone the wrong way, you're going to get killed. You're too loud, you're going to get killed. You're too this, you're going to get killed.
Obviously,
you
he
know.
was smart. He was so smart, maybe that his brain created that luck
Yeah,
for him.
well, you also have to be tough, right? But not physically tough, right?
mentally.
Obviously, you had to be some
they'll
kind of
break you.
physical tough.
They'll break you. They wouldn't break.
It was like we've all experienced this in our lives, right? A level where we think we can't go on anymore,
Yes.
where just everything's too hard. And it was interesting. When I was 19 years old, I decided that I was born and raised in London, as you can tell from my accent, we spoke about before. But I decided that, you know, as a Jew, and through everything we experienced, I really should be living in Israel, in my homeland. So my family all still lives in London, my mum and grandma, and dad and sisters, and I said, you know, I'm going to live in Israel. They're like, you know, a bit sad, and my grandma wasn't
You'll
too
be
happy.
back.
But
There's a-
you'll be back. Yeah,
yeah.
okay, go on then. Like, you know, rolled their eyes. So I went to Israel, and after a year, I decided that I was going to sign up for the army.
Oh, okay.
Because I felt that, you know, if other people are doing that to protect our homeland,
Yes.
I should as well. And when I signed up, I'd actually gone back to London to be with my family the week before I'd signed up.
Yes.
And I was at the synagogue on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. And after synagogue, I'd gone outside and I saw this old gentleman looking, you know, a bit confused. And I said to him, you know, I can help you or something. And he said, well, this is my address. I get a little bit confused. And I said, oh, well, you know, which direction?
I'll take it.
I said, I'll walk you. And so we're walking really slowly. He had like a limp and he was, you know, walking quite hard and you know, had a heavy European accent. And I said, sir, tell me your story. And he turned around and he said he was born in Eastern Europe and ended up, you know, in a small town and he had a twin brother and him and his twin brother were sent to Auschwitz. And in the line, Mengele took him and his brother. And the same Dr. Mengele that Jack had an experience, so too did they. And as part of the evil experimentation that he did on them, he injected them with lead into their blood. And it completely screwed up this guy's leg.
And that's why he was limping.
And that's why he was limping. And his brother was injected with something else and he was okay. somehow, by the grace of God, both of them survived. The war ends and they don't have anywhere to go, right? You know, the British stopped, you know, people entering. Could have saved a lot of lives if they would have opened it. The war ends and they somehow find themselves in Israel in the Independence War. His brother, they both go to sign up and they said, well, you can't do very much, right, with your legs, so you can help in the office or something. His brother, who was fit and healthy, went off to fight. And he went off to fight and he was killed in the battle over Jerusalem. Right. And he turned around to me and said, but Johnny, just so you know, my brother died with a smile on his face.
Yeah, that's a free man.
He died fighting for his country.
Yes.
He didn't die in a camp, he died fighting for his country. There's a difference. And then that was like the week before I signed up. Mm-hmm. And I'm not in the, I'm not some, top physical specimen, right? I wasn't, I played a little.
Probably were then.
Well, I played a little
more,
bit of football
yes.
and stuff, but I was never like in the best shape. And even when I signed up for the army, I was like, eh. And then I found myself, in all the physical tests and all of that stuff. And very, very quickly, you're seeing people, kind of like a jarhead style testing where, people are just dropping right, left, and center. I don't want it anymore, but leaving. And after maybe a very short period of time, you realize that the physical aspect is hard, the same level of hard for everybody, right? It's all mental.
It is.
All mental. And if you have the will to get through it, you will. And that's how I got through. But by having these people in my life, and by having these people in my mind, and by understanding all of this, and and I experienced it for one day, right? Well, my mental strength probably wouldn't have lasted much longer than that. But for these other people, for these Holocaust survivors, and when you look at them and say, well, how did they carry on? They have a gene. They must have something that allows them to be strong, but mentally strong, and not physically strong necessarily.
They destroyed your soul, your spirit, right?
And your body.
Yeah. Did you, by the way, congratulations. I want to talk to you about the state of Israel now, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I think hatred breeds hatred, right?
Absolutely.
If you take human dignity away, they come back retaliating. It hurts me that there are people that are confined in these small spaces by the... I may be wrong. Honestly, I may be wrong, right? From what I see and what I'm led to believe, that there are people who Palestinians, because it was their land, right? It was taken away by the British or whoever who decided Israel is going. Surely, and I know at those times, the Christians, the Muslims, just lived happily next to each other, and they messed it up.
It was messed up by the Turks. It was messed up by the British.
Correct.
Then when obviously Israel got established, it was messed up again.
Is it possible? Because there's so much hatred.
There's so much hatred. It really is one of the most difficult things, and it's hard. It's hard for everybody, right? Let's not get this, mistaken. It's hard for us as well. Like, it's easier for me to look at from my perspective, obviously. But even when I'm looking,
but I get it. If I've been persecuted for thousands of years, I want to have a home and make sure it never frigging happens again.
Yeah.
Right? I get it. I honestly get it.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But at the same time, I'll be like, well, I can't move these people out because they want to come back in. Right?
It's not as simple as them coming back in.
I'm simplifying it.
Of course. Like, absolutely. And it is a massive problem, right? And when we look at it and when we think about how will peace eventually come about in the Middle East, and it is 100% possible. Look, you were from Iran, everything was fine, before the revolution. Correct. My stepfather's family's from Iran, right? They lived, very happily. Iranians, Persians, Persian Jews, and
nicest
Persian
people.
Oh my goodness, everyone was friendly, right? The best place to be a Jew for thousands of years was in the Arab world.
Yes.
Right, in Morocco, and in Algeria, in Iran, Iraq, everywhere. The safest place for Jews was in Arab countries. And Jews were persecuted by Christians.
Correct, in Europe,
right,
yes.
in Europe, and now in the last few years since this rise in extreme, Islam, this is kind of what's happened.
Yes.
And it's switched, and we're being persecuted by someone else, and it becomes much more difficult. But if anything's taught us something, is that the last few years has definitely shown us that there is most definitely a way for peace. Look, we're having this conversation in Dubai.
I know, in Dubai, I never would have thought, yes.
Right.
We are lucky with the leadership. I'm not just saying because we are so lucky with this leadership.
Yeah.
That they share the wealth, they share the knowledge, they are forward thinking. They're making peace with Iran.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
They actually have delegates negotiating, making peace again.
Well,
which I never thought would happen.
Well, hopefully that is something that's good for all of us in the end. Because unfortunately, I think Iran's a different story. And I think Iran is a different story is because you're being held hostage by awful extremist leadership. I'd love to
how
visit.
bad the regime, believe me, I do, it's home.
Yeah.
The regime may have been stealing, but it was one family, right?
Yeah.
Here, they're all stealing.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you use religion, I was, that guy in Haiti,
Yeah.
Papa Doc?
Mm-hmm.
And he was into, I don't know if you know, he was into voodoo and stuff. I was like, that's not so dissimilar to Iran. Yeah, they're using religion to control you. But again, it's not going to last. The younger generation will replace the old idiots.
We're seeing the most horrendous things over the last few days. I think the biggest hashtag ever in the history of Instagram has been about this young lady who was killed, this 21-year-old lady.
You know what's amazing? Women are coming out. It's women-led.
Again, you just hope that this is something that will lead to another revolution, because honestly, for goodness sake, Iranians...
I think the regime is too ruthless.
You know
they
what?
Are ruthless.
Nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. And I mean, you look at Putin now with Ukraine and all this stuff, and you're saying, what's happening in our world? Right? Why is all this hatred? Why can't normal people just stand together? And the truth is that there is a lot of good people. Often, and the media, with the way it is, especially today, loves taking the cases of the most extreme.
Yeah, and then evil, make it evil because that sells.
Yeah.
That's good viewers, yes.
It's clickbait, it's all of that stuff. Israel, Palestine, Israel, Palestine, Israel, Palestine. Come on, go to... I invite you next time we'll do this podcast from Israel.
I would love to. I would love to.
Oh my goodness, you're going to see so many Palestinians. You had just Palestinian ministers in the Israeli government, right? There's no apartheid, there's no difference. There is a major problem within extremist groups, right, which you can't deal with, right? So Gaza,
and I guess you get on both sides.
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, look, Gaza's run effectively by Hamas, which is Iranian-backed, and a terror group.
Yes.
You can't make peace with someone who wants you dead.
Yes.
It doesn't really work.
Yes.
But when someone is pragmatic and understands, it's better for all of us.
You can communicate, you can understand
Egypt,
each other. Yes.
Right? Who would have believed that Israel and Egypt would be peaceful neighbors? We've been peaceful neighbors, incredibly peaceful neighbors. And this was our most right-wing Prime Minister, Menachem Begin, who brought us that peace. Right? You see the same thing with Lebanon, right? Which was, now is a lot trickier, and you got all the problem with Iran and Russia and all of that stuff, right? But, we got peace of border with Jordan, right? And Egypt. And eventually... When and again, this goes right back to what we were saying almost at the beginning. When a population is kept poor and sad with nothing to live for, they do crazy shit.
Exactly.
Right? But if you've got a bit of money in your pocket and you've got prospects for your future.
And your family.
And your family, you want
something
peace.
to live for. Yeah.
There's nothing more. Especially, look, I've seen Holocaust survivors. I've witnessed their stories over and over again. I don't want, God forbid, any possibility for my children and grandchildren not to live in peace. Mm-hmm. There's nothing I wouldn't do for peace, right? You look at Oslo, you look at all the other concessions Israel made in the past of peace. None of them, unfortunately, worked. But when it really comes down to it, everyone's like, yes, we'll do what we need to do to try and make peace.
Yet we need to protect ourselves.
Yeah, we need to protect ourselves. And this is kind of what it falls down to. When there is a moderate partner, please, and we see all the time, my friend's got this incredible kosher restaurant in Warsaw in Poland. He's Israeli Moroccan, right? He was born in Morocco, so he speaks Arabic, and he's Israeli, and he's now living in Poland, and his two chefs are Lebanese, right? One of them's actually a doctor,
yes.
a pediatrician.
He's a chef now.
But he came from Lebanon.
Yes.
He can't work as a doctor quite yet in Europe, so he's cutting shawarma, right? Kebab,
yes.
Right?
All working with each other happily.
No problem in Arabic and laughing and joking and, making fun of each other and having fun. We can all live together when we break it down.
Education's key. Education is everything.
Respect. Just respect and understanding, you could be a Muslim and that's cool. It's perfectly fine. In fact, it's awesome. It's much more fun having variety.
Yes.
Right? I love the fact that I can go in Tel Aviv and sit down in an amazing Iranian restaurant, Persian restaurant, and have khoresh. Right? I love that I can sit in a Turkish restaurant, in a Lebanese, in a Japanese, in an African, and whatever it is. Life is more fun when
So
it's not
true.
all the same.
So true. Tell me about your daughters.
Ah,
Do you share your stories with your daughters?
absolutely.
You've taken them to the concentration camp?
Nope.
Ah.
So, my eldest daughter Michali is 13, and my youngest daughter Yaeli is 9.
So they have Israeli mum.
Yeah. My
Okay.
ex-wife's Israeli, and they're everything for me. You know, but there's nothing better than being a dad.
Do you live with them, or you see them when you go
When
to
I'm in Israel, they're with me, and every summer we travel together and stuff.
Quality time.
Yeah, and the summers especially, we travel every summer. It really doesn't matter what I'm doing. All summer we're together, and every year we do something else. This year we traveled. I was with my eldest daughter actually in Dubai. She wanted to come here. She'd
Yes.
seen it on TikTok and Instagram. She's like, "Dad, I need to go to Dubai." I'm like, "Oh," I'm like, "Remember, Dad's not a sheikh, right?" I'm like, "Easy,
Sure.
right?" So we came to Dubai anyway, and then we traveled all summer with my daughters, and it was an amazingly fun time. And with the girls, they know what I do to a degree. I'll often, on my ex-wife's side, her family were also Holocaust survivors. In fact, my eldest daughter is named after her great-grandmother, who was the only member of her family to survive Auschwitz. She survived Auschwitz, and she died just a little bit before my eldest daughter was born, so we named her after her, and we've told her story. But with the girls, definitely, if last year was Michal's bat mitzvah, when they're becoming of age.
Yes.
And so we held a party in Israel, and I actually held a party for her in Poland. And the reason I held a party for her in Poland was because I wanted to give her the opportunity to meet some of these people.
And she did. And they
And
came.
at her bat mitzvah,
They came.
a group of about 10 of the righteous amongst the nations came, including a 102-year-old man who'd saved 54 Jews, a guy with the name of Joseph Olashchak, who sadly passed. But Joseph was there at her bat mitzvah, and the other righteous were there, and they took part in this celebration. And she had an opportunity to meet these heroes. And this was something that I'm incredibly proud of. And even this summer, we took a big detour driving to Lucerne. And we went to Lucerne for one reason, and that was because one of the righteous lady who I helped escape from Ukraine,
Yes.
had gone to family members in Lucerne.
You need to
So I wanted
meet
the
her and
girls.
see how she's doing.
I wanted to see how she's doing. I wanted the girls also to see her. And even though I won't go into all the stories in depth, I want to make sure that they meet these people.
Yes.
What I think probably one of the pictures I love most in the whole world it was about 4 years ago now. Mr. Mossberg, Eddie Mossberg, who I've spoken about many times, whose bracelet I wear, he'd actually spoken at some event in Poland, and the CEO of El Al, Israel's airline, was there, and they were doing a code share between LOT Polish Airlines and El Al. And at the opening event, I got Mr. Mossberg to speak as someone who kind of unites Poles and Israelis and Jews. And the CEO of El Al said, "I want you to come and speak to my top executives." And that was crazy, right? Because, an airline's very difficult to run at the best of times, and you always need to be online. A room way bigger than this, all of his top executives are there. He said, "I've never told you to turn your phones off. Everybody turn your phones off now." And they sat down and listened to Mr. Mossberg speak, and it completely changed everybody. So Eddie was in Israel, and I brought my girls to meet him. And so we walk around the hotel a little bit, and he had a bit of a shake. And Michali, who must have been, I think, 7 or 8 at the time, just went up and took his hand and started walking with him. And like I cried then.
Yeah.
I cried then.
You
I
took
got
a
very
photo.
emotional. Yeah, I took a photo. There's a beautiful picture of them walking from behind. And that was those. When you go back to the question before, does the things make me cry? That stuff makes me cry.
So you have a beautiful obsession.
Yeah,
You have
absolutely.
to be obsessed to succeed in life in whatever you set out to do, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to look. It's not easy, right? And I think that the difficulty here isn't even necessarily the stories or the burden of carrying this history, because it's important. On one hand, I think that the main difficulty is probably the lack of interest that you find, because there is a kind of
Just past, let it be.
yeah,
Really,
just move on. Like there are people who, there's Holocaust fatigue. It was Eddie Wiesel that told me that. He said there is Holocaust fatigue, and people are tired. Oh, again with your Holocaust thingy, right? So that is kind of that does get a bit, and hatred online, right? Which happens all the time for everybody.
Do you get hate?
Oh yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. Like a lot of anti-Semitic stuff. There'll be and I'll say something that, in this podcast we've spoke about, for example, Putin, just mentioning his name, I'll get rammed on something
people.
else with, a bunch of Russian trolls, right? Or you'd say something that was pro, Russia.
I talk about money and I get hate.
Yeah.
That everybody deserves abundance. Suddenly, why are you always talking about money? I'm talking about abundance and happiness. Sorry, I think everybody should be happy, right?
But
it's crazy.
It is crazy, but I think that this is also like part of it is like you just have to be able to learn to roll with this hate and just take it and realize that it just isn't personal. And to be honest with you, like the biggest life lessons that I've got have been as a result of this hatred, because you realize it's all just a bloody game.
Yes.
For most of these people, it's just a game. It's just some loser sitting in his mummy's basement,
pissed off with their lives,
pissed off, having a beer, scratching his nose. He's got nothing else
want
to
have
do.
A six pack.
Yeah, I don't.
Not earning the money he wants, and
exactly.
he blames the world for his failures.
So and he's like, keyboard warriors is what they call them, right? These just losers
exactly.
doing nothing. Strong men sitting there and these troll farms, all that stuff. And
Yesterday actually, I had a message. Somebody saying, "You claim you're Iranian." I said, "Yes, I am. I was born there." He goes, "Well, if you claim you're Iranian, you're gonna use that to make money. Why don't you talk about what's happening in Iran right now and stand up for the women?" I said, "Well, I don't make political statements, right? What I do privately, I do that." And I got so much hate from her.
Right.
And I started responding. I thought, actually, it's not achieving anything.
No.
Nothing. And then they stopped communicating.
Yeah, I get that all the time. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? We can't do everything.
Exactly.
Right. But we do what we do. Right. And the point is it doesn't really matter that you can't justify this.
And you can't please everybody.
No, and you're going to piss some people off, and there'll be something I said that's going to trigger other people. The fact that we talk about collaborators.
Yes.
Some people get angry. We didn't do it. It's like whoa. Right. We all have our truth. Right.
Exactly.
And our truths will all be different, right? And that's also okay.
Respect people's truths and keep it to yourself. Don't try to
or you can argue
change
with someone,
somebody else's.
but we can have a discussion, right? You can ask difficult questions, and you can challenge people and get them to think, and that's fine. But it needs to be done in a respectful and decent way. And I think the biggest problem is that none of this is respectful and decent.
Yes.
But I also don't think this will carry on for very long. I think this is going to be some kind of jolt within our generation. And that there has to be some kind of verification.
I think the world's going to be a better place after we've gone. Honestly, I believe in a new generation. I believe in human beings. I think most of our new generation care about the environment. They care about the world. They care about peace. I think so.
Young people always tend to, and then when you get a bit older, you try and just let it be. I mean, that's always what happens, right? Always have these young people get very involved, and then they become a lot more right-wing as they get older and all that stuff. I think eventually, a lot of the problems we're seeing today are things connected to like online bullying, and cyber crimes. I think that will have to be dealt with eventually and regulated, because that isn't okay.
A couple of months ago, I saw a moving article on LinkedIn. There was a father of this handicapped child, and he was trying to raise some money. So I said, "How can I help?" You won't believe how much hate messages I got.
Yeah.
Do you know what they were saying? "Why are you helping a white kid?" I'm like, I didn't even think the child was white. I was just helping a disabled child, right? But the way that people see it is color of the skin, or they're based on their own reality, based on their own.
This is also nuts, and I get it as well. You're white. It's like,
am I? Yeah.
Am I? Like, I wasn't white enough, 70 years ago, and suddenly, I've got white. Jews have got white privilege. Really? Yes. You kidding me? But suddenly, everyone's got this privilege, and everyone's got this. Just be a decent person.
Exactly.
Just focus on yourself, and it's so much easier to be woke, right?
Yes.
And to call people out.
Yeah.
And then actually make a difference.
Or look in the mirror yourself, right?
It's so much easier to be woke because you don't have to think much. It's like, you want to make a difference, shout and point at that person. It's like, whoa, if you want to make a difference, go and volunteer.
Yes.
Right? Go and help people who really need it, because people are truly struggling today.
Yes.
Truly across the platform. And really this is when kind of back to what the foundation and the point of all of this is to really try and understand of just how we're decent people today, and how we step up, and how we look at a future that's better. Because right now we're not going down a good path. We just aren't. And it's a very difficult time to live in. And I think the other part of all of this as well is that however difficult it feels today, it's been more difficult.
Yes.
And it's been harder. And people got through that.
Yes.
And the way people got through that is by really persevering and believing in themselves and being decent. And I think that this is also a big message, because we do have a difficult few years ahead. I think it's obvious to everybody by this point. Huge inflations and recessions and difficulties.
Recession's coming. 100%,
yeah, and when you look at all of this stuff, things do get tough. But you know what? All of us will have what to eat.
Yes.
Right? All of us will have safety.
Yes. We just won't go as many holidays and won't have the cars that we want to drive, but it's going to be tough times.
Yeah, and
well, who said life's easy, right?
It's these things that kind of make us who we are as well.
Exactly.
Like you are who you are because of what you experienced having to escape Iran and grow up in the UK and experience racism and all of that stuff. That makes you who you are.
You watch my videos.
Yeah,
and listen to the podcast.
Of course, it doesn't listen to your podcast. But it's all of these points make us who we are because of what we experience. I too, experienced racism, experienced hatred, experienced anti-Semitism. And all of this stuff does make me who I am. It makes me look over my shoulder a little bit more, of course, and potentially paranoid of all of this stuff. But that also pushes you and forces you to make a difference and to stand up and try and be counted.
Beautiful. Our listeners, if they want to contribute,
yeah.
Thank you, by the way. We've been over an hour. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
An hour and 15 minutes. Time flies.
It does.
So I swear I want you here again. Oh, we do another one in Israel. I hold you to that.
Absolutely up for it.
Just let me know the dates. I'll just book.
Done.
Also, I would a favor.
Yeah, go on.
Most of these survivors don't speak English now, do they?
A lot of them do.
They do.
A lot of them do.
I would be honored if you're ever gonna meet one. Invite me to come.
Absolutely, brother.
I'll be honored.
Absolutely.
It's my dream.
Absolutely,
to
brother.
meet one.
Absolutely.
20, 30 years ago, my ex-wife, used to have a beauty salon, and it was in a Jewish area, Cheetham Hill.
Yeah,
in Manchester.
Yeah.
And
near Salford, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And the story was that when the Jewish people came, they walked and they just put their cases down and they were tired and they just set up home in that area. So it's a big Jewish community, and lots of her clients, women, had the tattoos. And I hate the fact, most of them are passed away now, hate the fact that I didn't spend time with them. And they were so nice. I missed on that. Yeah. And if you do, I would be honored.
No question.
If you let me know, I'll just join, just sit to the back, hold their hand, kiss their hand.
Yeah. They really are the most important people to sit down and listen with and make sure that we figure it out.
I'll be honored.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Now, if our listeners want to contribute, how do they, please, to the camera, tell them how do they contribute?
I'm going to pitch the camera, but I'm sure
just tell me, and then we'll have captions on it.
Exactly, to our website, fromthedepths.org, and really it's,
where does the money go? What do you do with it?
Actually, we're really, really lucky. We're really lucky that we don't have any staff. The good thing about, another good thing about our generation is that people do like to volunteer. So we have people mainly volunteering with us. We've got one full-time driver, which is the guy who drives the Righteous in those London taxis that I spoke about. But everyone else, including myself, doesn't take a salary from the foundation. And the focus on this is really just making sure that the money goes back into education and to helping them. So the big focus right now, what I'm trying to do at the moment, is we're looking at what, coming up to this winter is going to be a very difficult winter.
Yes.
Here in Dubai, I don't really think about the cold ever coming.
Yeah, but
in Europe,
Poland, it's freezing.
Absolutely freezing. I mean, even now, like, I was in Poland last week, and I jumper and jacket and hat, and it was cold. It's going to be a harsh winter. The energy prices are extreme.
Yes.
So what we're attempting to do is figure out how, again, you can't, if I come and give them a check for $1,000.
They won't know what to do with it.
Or 1,000 euros or 10,000 zloty. They'll know what to do with it.
Well, it'll just go.
They'll put it in the mattress, right? literally, or they'll give it to their loser grandson. It's usually one of those things.
Yes.
Everyone's got some, family member who needs help or whatever.
Yes.
They'll give it to them. They'll think, I'll be okay. And last year, as part of the Christmas gifts, we gave these like fleece blankets. And a few of them were like, oh, that's so good because I don't want to turn my heating on, it's too expensive. And that was last year, and the energy prices have really soared now. So one of the things we're attempting to do right now is figure out, and this is actually part of what I'm doing on my holiday, is working on pitches to different energy companies to say, look, I want you to come on board with us and help, because I want to take their energy to me, meaning I want them to know that it's free.
Yes.
Because if I give them money for it, they still won't use it. But when it's free, I'll say, look, just turn it on. Like, it's free, it's paid
And they
for.
can do that per household?
It's really tricky because there's all these, like, you know...
You're speaking government levels now.
Yeah, which isn't too hard. We have, thank God, very good government relations all over. So we have to like push on people to say, look, help us help them.
Amazing. So it goes straight to the bottom line. It goes straight to
absolutely. Even we have fiscal sponsors. Like no one takes any money of us.
Yes.
Like literally 100% of the donation goes straight to where everyone to go, which is really quite special, actually.
I'm honoured, bro.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
I'm honoured.
Thank
I
you.
noticed I was in Holland. I went to Krakow.
Yeah.
Stayed there for a week, and then went to Amsterdam. And I was reading this book about the old people of Amsterdam. There was one survivor of the Holocaust, and then he made it his life. You may know, you may not. He's a lawyer in Amsterdam, and he sued companies like the Dutch Railway who profited from taking prisoners or people who were being taken to concentration camps. It was interesting because lots of businesses profited.
And lots of people didn't even think about Ford.
Right.
Ford, no one realizes that. Henry Ford was a horrible man.
No. Tell me.
Father Ford, the big Ford, you know, the creator of the company, was an absolute evil man. Like he hosted Nazis. He gave money to the Nazi party.
Really?
Yeah, they were like Jews working in DP camps making parts of Ford. He was an absolute Nazi.
He profited from it.
100% profited. And, you know, so Ford, you know, make this effort to try and cover up their history. And, you know, in their museum, they have nothing written about that. Amazing. They give symbolic money to, like, Holocaust museums. It's like, you know, take this, don't say
Keep
anything,
it quiet,
go away.
Yes.
And obviously, everyone knows about, you know,
BMW,
Mercedes.
Yes.
Hugo Boss made Nazis' outfits. Right, it's how they all look so good, all designed by Hugo Boss, bastards, right?
Yeah.
You know, all these companies, and it's like,
they look good. Yeah, I was actually reading. Freaking Mussolini started it all.
yeah,
You know that, don't you? In 1921 or something, Mussolini started the black clothes and.
yeah. It was scary, right? This like image of these, you know. So they're all, you know, all their things made by Hugo Boss, and you look up, you know, but. We move on. It's actually when I got a car in Poland because driving around with all the writers, I called Mr. Mossberg, and I said, Eddie, like, you know, I'm getting a car. Like, there's a really good deal on an older. What I call him, I said, there's a really good deal on an older Mercedes. It was like 2014. It was quite a good price. I was like, do you mind? He said, look, they're bastards, but they make good cars. Right? It's fine. Time's moved on. So, you know, I drive a Mercedes today. But absolutely, these companies most definitely still have a responsibility, and most of them haven't really dealt with it properly.
They haven't. They
like
live in
Ford,
denial.
like I said, don't deny.
Although Ford was in the US, they still supported the Nazis in Germany.
Absolutely, and parts were made by Ford factories, and he was a real, like, full-on Nazi sympathizer and supporter. Like, you can find all this stuff online.
Did Hitler live?
I don't think so. I think Hitler died in the bunker.
But lots of the top Nazis went to South America.
Yeah, we're living in Argentina and other South American countries.
There are villages that they don't even speak Spanish or anything. They speak German.
Yeah, till today.
Yes.
Yeah, and pictures of Hitler on the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to go and see these places.
I would love. I'll come with you.
Let's go challenge some people.
Let's do it.
But no, that for me, it's fascinating. That it's just these, like, you know, old Nazis who like ran there and hid and carried on.
Are they alive still? Or no?
Yeah,
Probably not.
you know, yes, there are definitely Nazis who are still alive, and still some being prosecuted.
Do you think it should still be prosecuted if they're 100 years old?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I think it also plays.
Don't let it go. Let it be, because they still kill people.
One thing that Mr. Mossberg would always say, he'd say, you know, everyone says never again. He'd also say never forgive. You know, and people would ask him, do you forgive what happens? Can you forgive? And he said, I have no right to forgive anybody. Yeah. Only the dead can forgive. And we don't have a right at all to
decision
forgiveness or to what. Absolutely not. There's zero forgiveness that any of us.
Those babies have a right. Yeah, those
children.
Women and children.
1.5 million children.
I know.
Murdered, like, in the most horrendous ways. You can't imagine that. It's unfathomable to have so much hatred on anybody. Truly.
Finally.
Yes.
There were gays disabled people are also suffered in the Holocaust. Is there a list that
Romani, like gypsies.
Yeah, gypsies.
Right.
Is there a list of those people that we could help as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There are different communities. I mean, look, every nation tells their own story, right? It's part of who we are. When I look at the Holocaust as a Jew, I'm formatively looking at it as a Jewish issue, right? Because that's my story to tell.
Of course.
However, there were, many gays who were killed in the Holocaust.
Yes.
As you said, disabled, Romani gypsies, Poles. This is something that a lot of people don't realize. But the Polish nation suffered huge loss.
Yeah. Didn't they lose like quarter of the population? Or something
Not quite. But about 3 million ethnic Poles were killed during the war. Between 2 to 3 million ethnic Poles and 3 million Jewish Poles. Right, Poland was the hub of Jewish life pre-war.
Correct.
So from the 6 million Jews who were killed in the war, 3 million of them were Polish Jews. So in addition to Poland losing their Jewish population, they also lost about 2 to 3 million of their own population. They were really smashed down and pushed down by the Germans. They were completely taken over. The Polish government was in the UK at the time. They managed to escape, and each nation does tell their own story. Which they should, and I try to when I talk of the Holocaust, as definitely also mention others and work with others as well. We've worked with the Romani community multiple times. We've also spoken a lot about the LGBTQ community and their roles in dealing with all this, and along with Poles and
so even your foundation is not exclusive.
Oh, absolutely not. No, look, at the end of the day, it's ridiculous to be just looking at yourself, because that's not that's how this shit happens.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
We need to look at it.
You have to practice it, and then we can.
If we suffer together, then we suffer together, and we always talk about this. Like most of our donors are Christians and Muslims and not Jews, and we don't ask anybody. I couldn't care less. All of the trips that we do, and we've taken many people out to visit with the righteous and to see the death camps. I think probably 90%.
Do you do visits to the death camps?
Yeah.
Man, send me these stuff, please.
Yeah, I will.
You got to. Okay, don't let this be.
No.
You're on your travels.
Yeah.
So how many more days? Do you leave tomorrow?
I do. I leave.
So what's your plan for today?
To be honest, I'm just trying to take it a bit easy. I'm not a big fan of the beach. I get very bored very quickly.
Yes.
I have a couple of books actually with me that I feel that I was like missing a bit of actually Russian literature from Dostoevsky and some other stuff.
Wow, deep stuff.
Deep stuff. I'm trying. There are 3 books that I've been asked to write. And I've written most of it.
I was going to say, have you written any books yet?
I've got 3 that I've
all on the go.
All on the go. They're all almost done, but I'm not really willing to let go yet. And I feel like I need to cover all my bases in terms of understanding from the greats of how to write and what to look at before I can really let go of what I've written. What
I find, I've been writing a book for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I keep writing it, and I think this is not portraying how I want it to come across. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also some of it, it talks about my childhood, and it's not been a good one. And some of those people are alive. And I don't want them to read the book and think, it's an attack on them. It's just...
I think you're just going to let go at some point.
Should it be an autobiography? Should it be written from a third party point, a fiction one, but with the message? It's very difficult writing.
It is, but you just have to let go at some point. I think this is what I've learned as well, is that for me, it's also what's keeping me stuck with letting go of the books is also, it's weird, but I'm happy to do a podcast like this, which will last forever, right? Or a TV interview, whatever it is. And I don't really, I'm fine. I don't want to know the questions in advance. I much prefer being surprised. But there's something about a book that kind of feels like I don't want my grandkids to pick it up and be like,
yes.
Well, my grandpa was an idiot, right?
Like, no, they will never think that.
No, but do you know what I mean?
I think often we're too hard on ourselves, to be honest.
A little bit. So I'm a bit scared about these books, but I do just have to let it go. So I probably will spend the rest of the day reading something fun and exciting like Dostoevsky. Yeah. But, that's generally the plan. I want to go to see the Dubai Mall, but I thought about doing that on the way. to the
You have
airport.
to see I don't think it's the modern museum is incredible. That beautiful silver building.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Is it a good museum? I heard that the museums are a bit shit, to be honest.
No, it's a future museum. It's different.
Yeah?
It's all the future of humanity.
Okay.
Yeah, you like it.
Yeah.
You really, but I did, and I was impressed.
I don't, but I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only museum I've ever been to, I've been impressed, was the British Museum in London.
That's amazing,
Yeah,
isn't it?
but this one is a future museum. It's
Yeah.
it's the vision of our founder,
Yeah.
Sheikh Mohammed, and it's incredible. It's a beautiful building.
Yeah, no, I've seen the building. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Inside
The
it's so
writing
modern.
inside. Yeah.
So modern inside.
Well, maybe we'll have a look at it.
But it may be fully booked, so you
Yeah.
need to book it online. Definitely Burj Khalifa, tallest building in the world. Dubai Mall is the biggest aquarium in there.
Yeah, and they got that ski
Yeah,
slope
but
and
then
the other one.
my
as well.
driver will tell, if you say, I wanted this, he'll take you to places.
Yeah, awesome.
Have you seen the ski slope?
That's in the other mall, isn't
In
it?
the mall here. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
on the way, it's in one line.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I'll get him to take care of you.
Thank you, brother.
Done. But you have his mobile number, so just
Yeah,
WhatsApp
Malik.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, it honestly depends when he finishes with the kids.
I'll get it organized, I'll let you.
Yeah, so when he finishes with the kids, if he can meet us and we go to Dubai Mall and then we have to go to the airport tonight
Sure,
anyway.
sure,
I'm going
sure.
to
Yeah, you just
off
wanna
to
hang
New-
around.
off to Delhi this evening.
And also, you want to put your case somewhere
should be
safe.
an interesting experience.
I love, do you know what I love about India?
You been?
Yes. Colors. It's such a rich country of smells, colors, language. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm a bit nervous.
You're
I'm
like,
not. I'm.
No, you love. It's nothing like you think.
I'm
was
very- I
went
kind
to
of like-
Kerala. Kerala. Oh, I love
Kerala is meant to be amazing, but like
Yes.
New Delhi, I'm not. I'm like quite a big fan of things like personal space, and
You're gonna hate that. I was gonna say, if you can handle the traffic and everybody breathing down your
don't like that.
Yeah, then yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't like. I was in Japan and I was at the market, and it was all fine at the beginning.
Yes.
And suddenly everyone's pushing me.
Do you know what's really
They're
funny?
just pushing me. I'm like, stop pushing
But that's
me.
what they do.
Yeah,
Like,
they
do you know
do.
what's
Person
really funny?
walking
I
past
like
them.
my space. I was the other day. I was on an escalator, and an Indian gentleman stood on the same step as me.
You know what I mean?
I'm like, what the fuck? You know, just leave me alone. You have, and I said, you have the here and there. Why? And to him, it was nothing.
Yeah.
Being in my space is nothing. He stood on the same step.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
and he was like, why is he so mad and crazy at me? Because I
Yeah.
just like my freaking space. Leave me
I
alone.
was with a guy who was telling me that he was driving him mad, getting pushed all the time, and he was at the airport and he was wanting to take his suitcase. Everyone's pushing him, so he's like, you know, I'm going to try. So he like took his suitcase and just whacked someone.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, I just
No
came
big
straight
deal.
back.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was
Yeah,
like,
it's nothing.
Yeah, no.
It's nothing. We were talking about that this morning in our company meeting. Is that there's 1.6 billion Indian
Yeah.
people. Did you know the middle class population is bigger than the size of Europe? It's hard to imagine.
It is hard
the
to imagine.
middle class of India is bigger than the whole population of Europe.
Yeah.
It's a huge country.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. It's interesting when you look at the broadness of it.
You know, I went to Goa last year, and beautiful place. But to get from the airport to Goa, you don't want to do that road, you know, until they fix the infrastructure. Here, everything's built around the infrastructure of UAE is incredible.
come on! Like, this is another
Yeah.
level. I've got a friend of mine who's a businessman out there, so they sent me his driver to take me to Taj Mahal, and everyone's like, the guy was also telling me, he's like,
When you get there, it's nice. But
the guy was like, he's like, you've never seen so many people.
Yeah.
He's like, it's not like you can't even drive down a stretch of road where there won't be loads of people. It's like you'll be driving for hours and everywhere's people.
Yeah, and
like
also
you check into a
and
hotel.
it's not just people, cows,
Yeah.
dogs.
Oh, you
animals.
can't touch cows.
No, they
No.
just
Oh,
they
they're holy,
stop
right?
in front of
Yeah.
the car, next to the car, and also noise.
Yeah.
Noise, the beeping and the horns constantly. Yeah,
I'm
So
quite excited.
Yeah,
Like
you'll enjoy
I
it.
love an experience.
Yeah.
I definitely know. And everyone's like,
you love the Indian people. They're
Yeah.
beautiful. They're amazing.
yeah. And someone's telling me as well that like, the chance of you not getting the right change is 99%.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but
you
like,
gotta
that's
be
also
you gotta
part-
be on your toes all the time.
Yeah.
Double check everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Even at the restaurant, just double check everything.
Yeah.
But it's just different. You don't want to live there, in my opinion, but it's just different.
I've traveled. I've been really blessed to have traveled to a lot of different countries, and it's all part of an experience
It
and
is.
experiencing life.
It's going to be the second biggest economy on the planet after
Yeah.
China.
Bloody hell!
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean,
to think about, isn't it?
the richest man now is the second richest man on the planet.
Indian.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people.
Can you imagine if you have a SIM card that suddenly you have 780 million users. You dominate the world, right? It's and what's happening is that I think the country is only 60, 70 years old, right? After
70,
independence, nothing. They're a young country.
They are a young country. Another
And rich.
Yeah.
Rich. The good old British taxed them for hundreds of years. And the Canadians, the British, and the Americans, the South Africans. Britain's done quite well.
Yeah, it is interesting, but it was like, because they've offered me like this slum tour. I'm like, nah, I don't fancy that.
No, it's heartbreaking.
No, that makes me sad, stuff like that.
Yeah, what happens is, one thing, generally speaking, Indians are very peaceful people. And what happens, a billionaire could be living next to people who are living in boxes, and it's just okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen that anywhere in the world where it's just okay. Yeah.
You just
Everybody accepts it as it is.
Yeah.
I couldn't live in that $1 billion palace, knowing right next door to my wall that people are sleeping rough in boxes.
Yeah, but you feel sad.
But that's the way it is over there.
Yeah. No, it's a different mindset, and it's not Western and all of this stuff. It's just different, and that's okay.
And you know what? They're all happy.
Yeah.
They're all happy. People in the street, you will not see so many people with smiles on their faces, happy.
Yeah.
Capitalist world hasn't taken over their mindset. They're just happiest people and the poorest people.
Yeah. Well, it's a lesson about wealth as well, isn't it? It's not all about fancy watches and fancy.
That's another conversation.
That is another conversation.
Johnny,
thank you so much,
brother.
brother.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
My honor.
Thank you
please
so
give
much.
my regards to your partner.
Definitely.
We'll organize the drivers.
Thank you.
Keep in touch. You owe
Absolutely.
me some visit
Done.
to Israel.
No, we're in touch.
Meeting survivors. More donations from me.
Done. We're in touch.
Yeah, please.
We're in touch. 100%.
And visits to camps.
Absolutely.
Done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
God
I
bless
really
you.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you.